Hello friends, in this class we'll try to understand an outline of ancient Indian history. I hope you should have watched my previous class on understanding chronology. That becomes very much important in trying to understand this class, which is a sequentiation to the previous one. What is this sequentiation and what are the events which happened in ancient Indian history, which I will try to brief you in a very short span of time. In a few minutes time I will give an outline and understanding of ancient Indian history. Ancient India means from where to where, starting from where and it concludes where, that we have to know. Of the whole history we are dividing in India into ancient India, medieval India and modern India. Today in our class we will try to understand this ancient India. So it goes from where we have to begin this ancient Indian chronology, from where we have to begin this year and where we have to end. For our simple understanding, we have to know that in the chronological times, this is, I told you in the past class, this is birth of Christ in one place, and this is on one side which is called before Christ, and the other side which is called AD, which is simply after Christ or Anno Domini. So the ancient Indian history essentially concludes at one place which is approximately 1000 AD. All the events which had happened in India in historical connotation up to 1000 AD, we are simply calling it ancient India. So ancient India means up to 1000 AD. From what period, that we have not exactly fixed, because history itself can be understood in different sense. History we can say, and we have something which is called proto-history, prehistory also we can say. So in history means a period which has got reliable evidences, sources, we are calling it as an history. So in that sense, in this class I am going to start our sequentiation starting from one place which is called Indus Valley Civilization. So the whole of ancient India I am going to cover from Indus Valley Civilization up to 1000 AD. See, Indus Valley Civilization is, the period of Indus Valley Civilization is around 2500 BC to approximately 1500 BC. So Indus Valley Civilization 2500 BC to 1500 BC. The Indus Valley period also can be classified into a matured phase and a latter phase. The matured phase of the Indus Valley Civilization is 2250 BC to 1950 BC. So this is called the matured period of Indus Valley Civilization. Afterwards, the Indus Valley Civilization began to decline. I hope when I am saying Indus Valley Civilization, you would understand that earliest civilization in the world which emerged in the banks of Indus River. That is one of the greatest civilizations, and in this class we will not speak more about that. Separate classes we will do based on this Indus Valley Civilization and the whole sequentiation, but sufficient in this class to know that the Indus Valley Civilization flourished from 2500 BC to 1500 BC. When the Indus Valley Civilization had begun to decline, simultaneously during this time in India, another event happened which is called the incoming of foreigners. And these foreigners we are calling them as Aryans. There has been some confusion by the historians whether the foreigners happen to be Aryans or Aryans happen to be the indigenous people, but we will go by the NCERT and the basic textbook which says that Aryans happens to be incoming nomads, incoming foreigners. So the Aryan period in Indian history can be traced to 1500 BC to approximately 700 BC. The Aryan period in history is simply called as Vedic period. And Vedic period, as I said, is 1500 BC to 700 BC. And this Vedic period also can be classified into two. One, early Vedic period. Second is later Vedic period. Early Vedic period is 1500 BC to 1000 BC. Later Vedic period is 1000 to around 700 BC. The early Vedic period is a period in which Rig Veda is written. The The early Vedic period may be also called as Rig Vedic period. The latter Vedic period is the period when all other three Vedas, which is called Yajur, which is Sama and Atharvana Veda, all the three Vedas are written. So the early Vedic period is a period in which Rig Veda is compiled. Written in the sense, when I use the term written, it is per se not written during this period, because the early Vedic Aryans never knew the art of writing. They had compiled the Vedas in the form of verses, and they had passed this information from one generation to another generation orally. And Vedas were put to writing only during the time of Guptas, which is the 3rd century AD and later. So when I use the term Vedas written, I am speaking about compilation. So in the early Vedic period, the early Veda, which is a Rig Veda, is compiled. In the latter Vedic period, all other three Vedas, Yajur, Sama and Atharvana, they were compiled. And after this Vedic period, we will come to around 600 BC to 500 BC. This period is very important because during this time in India, something which is called urbanization had happened. Urbanization. This is called period of urbanization. This urbanization in India is the second urbanization. Second one. The first urbanization we are calling is Indus Valley Civilization. We are calling as the first urbanization, or where the first urban centers developed in India during this time. The second urbanization in India happened around 1500 years after the Indus Valley Civilization, which is during this time 500 BC to 600 BC. There are many factors responsible for the emergence of urbanization during this time. We will not discuss very elaborately here, but sufficient to know that the second urbanization emerged during 500-600 BC, and this period can also be called as period of Mahajanapada. Mahajanapada. Maha means big, Jana means people, Pada means feet. Mahajanapada literally means people where, places where people had settled, or in simple sense, Mahajanapada means states, city-states. A small city existed and the small city acted as a state. So Mahajanapada essentially means a small city and the small city acted as a state. During this time, though there are different versions of the story, during this time the number of Mahajanapadas which we speak is 16. There are some other sources which says the Mahajanapadas extended up to 32, but standardly it is accepted that there were 16 Mahajanapadas. The 16 Mahajanapadas are the city-states. Most of them existed in the northern part of India. Most of them existed in the northern part of India among the 16, except one, which is Avanti. This Avanti Mahajanapada is located in the Deccan region. All other 15 Mahajanapadas, they were spread in the region starting from Kabul and up to the region of Bengal. All these Mahajanapadas were spread, and this is the period of Mahajanapadas. Similarly, I can say next period, a period around 500, I can say 500, 400 BC. This period I can say as the period of emergence of heterodox sect. Heterodox sects. Hetero means different, sects means religious sects I am speaking. This period is characterized by emergence of numerous sects which later developed into great religion, namely Buddhism, Jainism, Ajivika, Charvaka, etc. So like this, many heterodox sects emerged. There are reasons why these heterodox sects emerged only around 500, 400 BC, and we will discuss that in some other class, but heterodox sects emerged around 500, 400 BC. So this period is characterized by this. Next, after this period, we have emergence of political dynasties. I said there were 16 Mahajanapadas which existed in the ancient India. Among the 16 Mahajanapada, one Mahajanapada which is called Magadha became predominant over a period of time. Over a period of time means around 550 to around 300. This Magadha emerged from a city-state. Magadha emerged from a city-state into a big empire. So the emergence of Magadha is a very important aspect during this time 500 BC to 300 BC. Now in this Magadha, what are the dynasties which existed? Around 500s in Magadha BC, we have a dynasty which is called Haryanka dynasty. Haryanka dynasty. And you have to remember one or two names in this Haryanka dynasty. One important name in the Haryanka dynasty is Bimbisara. A very important ruler, Bimbisara, around 540, he ruled 540 BC, and he succeeded by his son, who is called Ajatasattu. Bimbisara and Ajatasattu. After this Haryanka dynasty, we have rulers like Kalasoka, and we will not go deep into that. And after this dynasty, we have an important dynasty which is called Nandas, who ruled around 350s to 400s BC. Nandas. And these Nandas in history are called as Navananda, because these Nandas who ruled happens to be 9 brothers, one after the other in sequentiation. 9 brothers have set to rule the whole of Magadha, and they were responsible for the expansion of Magadha. The first Nanda ruler happens to be Mahapadmananda. Mahapadmananda, and the last ruler happens to be Dhanananda. So Nandas ruled Magadha after this period. And for your information, the last ruler of this Nanda dynasty, who happens to be Dhanananda, was defeated by a person, or was put to rest by a person who is called Chandra Gupta Maurya. So this Chandragupta Maurya put an end to this Nanda rule and started what is called as the Maurya dynasty. So the Mauryas came into being around 320s for information, to be very precise in 326 BC, and the Mauryas ruled from 326 BC to 184 BC. Maurya emperors ruled. The most important ruler happens to be one, Chandragupta Maurya. Next we have his son, who is called Bindusara. Then we have his son, who is a very important ruler of the Maurya dynasty, who is called Ashoka. Then after Ashoka's death, which is in the year Ashoka's death in the year 234 BC, the Mauryan Empire began to decline, and in a very short period of time, in 184 BC, the last Mauryan emperor, who is called Brihadatta, was killed by his Brahmin minister, who is called Pushya Mitra Sunga. So the Pushya Mitra Sunga, who happens to be a Brahmin, he killed the last Maurya ruler, who happens to be Brihadatta. So there the Mauryan Empire ended, and afterwards we have the emergence of a dynasty which is called Sunga dynasty. Then we have a dynasty, Sunga dynasty is ruled by Pushya Mitra Sunga. After him, his son Pushya Mitra, and after then his son Agnimitra, he ruled Agnimitra. After the Sungas, we have a dynasty which is called Kanva dynasty. And over a period of time, all these small dynasties, they decline, and we come to the period which is 200 BC to 200 AD. We all know the difference between 200 BC to 200 AD. Those people who have listened to my previous class, they would have known that the difference between 200 BC to 200 AD is approximately 400 years. This period in Indian history is called the period of foreign invasions. And during this time, many foreigners invaded India, and notable among them happens to be Sakas. And these foreigners, when they came to India, they brought their culture, their identity, and they mixed with Indian culture and identity. Over a period of time, a heterogeneous cultural identity in India emerged. Most of the foreigners who came to India, they followed either Buddhism or Jainism. And for information, that is a very important point, they followed Buddhism and Jainism. So this period in Indian history is called period of foreign invasion. And the notable foreigner you must know is called Kanishka, who was a Kushana ruler. Kanishka was a Kushana ruler, and know that Kanishka convened the 4th Buddhist Council in 70 AD. 4th Buddhist Council Kanishka convened. I will speak about the Buddhist councils in some other classes. Kanishka convened the 4th Buddhist Council, the last of the great Buddhist councils he convened in the 70 AD in a place which is called Kashmir. Around Kashmir region he has convened the Buddhist council. So after this Kanishka, we have a emergence of a dynasty in the central part of India, who happens to be called as Satavahanas, around 200 AD. we have Satavahanas. Then we have dynasty who is called Ikshvaku, Ikshavakus, Ikshvakus, around this time 300 AD. So Satavahanas, Ikshvaku, these dynasties existed in the central part of India, because by this time the northern part of India had disintegrated and small dynasties, they continue to exist. The focus of history, the political history, was shifted from the northern part of India to central part of India. And afterwards, in the northern part of India, we have emergence of new dynasty around 300 AD. This dynasty we call them as Guptas. And there were three important Gupta rulers. One is Chandragupta, second is Samudragupta, and third is Chandragupta II. And we have the following Gupta rulers. So the Guptas came to throne around 300 AD, and the Guptas began to decline around 550 AD. So the Guptas also contributed to the development of Indian culture and political life. Separate Gupta classes will take later, but the Guptas is a very important period. It is so important that some of the historians had named the Gupta period as the period of golden age in Indian history. After the Guptas, again in the northern India, disintegration had happened. There was a decentralization which happened. There emerged something which is called feudalism. First thing, decentralization. Second is feudalism, which happened in the northern part of India. And the last great important ruler of ancient India from northern India happens to be Harshavardhana. Harshavardhana, he belongs to a dynasty which is called Pushyabhuti dynasty. Pushyabhuti dynasty. Harshavardhana, he was one of the last important rulers of ancient India. Harsha ruled from a place which is called Kannauj, and he had another capital which is called Taneshwar. Kannauj, he ruled from a place which is called Kannauj, and he had another capital which is called Taneshwar. He ruled from these two places, and after the decline of Harsha, after the death of Harsha, there was a political vacuum which emerged in the northern part of India. The political vacuum was a result of feudalism in India, decline of trade, and position in the society of women and artisans had begun to decline. All these combined factors put to a decline, a political vacuum in the northern part of India. Just last one point I would say, during this time around 700 AD to around 1000 AD, in this 300 years approximately, the northern Indian history is characterized by a mutual fight. This fight in history is called tripartite struggle. This tripartite struggle means three rulers they fought. The three important dynasties they fought. One is Rashtrakuta. Next is Pala. Rashtrakuta, Palas, and we have another dynasty which is called Pratihara. So this Rashtrakutas, Palas, Pratiharas, they mutually fought against each other. This struggle continued to weaken the political history of northern part of India. So the tripartite struggle is a period essentially of mutual destruction both in polity and economy. So by this around 1000 AD, you must know the whole of northern part of India had been subjected to mutual decline and destruction. This created a political vacuum, and for your information, this political vacuum is responsible for entry of foreigners in India, and namely Turks. They entered into India during this time around 1000, and the Turks happens to be Muhammad, Ghazni, Ghori, all these people had entered. So it is the existence of a political vacuum which was responsible for the entry and establishment of Turkish rule in India. In a nutshell, this is what the whole of ancient Indian history in outline. I have not spoken here about the Deccan or the South in the ancient India. In the ancient Indian history, we have political events which happened in the South, which is Deccan. In the subsequent class, in the next class maybe, I will try to speak about the South Indian history, ancient South Indian history, giving relevance to dynasties like Chera, Chola, Pandya, Sangam, Pallavas, etc. I will be speaking. And thank you for listening to the class. Please subscribe for more updates.